What happens when a royal sits down for one of America's most prestigious interviews and walks out in fury? Prince Harry's much-hyped 60-minute sit-down with Anderson Cooper began as a portrait of calm composure. But as the conversation deepened, civility gave way to confrontation. What started as a cordial exchange between a seasoned journalist and a disillusioned royal soon unraveled into one of the most unforgettable walkouts in television history. The setting was classic. 60 minutes, minimalist, intimate, serious. 2 chairs, a coffee table, a soft wash of studio light. No audience, no spectacle, just quiet, heavy expectation. Anderson Cooper opened warmly, extending his hand. "Harry, thank you for being here." Harry nodded with a polite but distant smile. His posture was relaxed, yet there was something taut beneath it. A coiled restraint, like someone bracing for impact. "Well," he said, "I suppose the world expects me to explain myself. So here I am." Anderson chuckled softly, easing the air. "That's the beauty of conversations like this. People get to hear directly from you." The first stretch went smoothly enough. Anderson asked about life in America, new projects, the transition from royal duty to private citizenship. Harry responded fluently, but there was an edge. "America's been tolerable," he said, his tone almost smug. "At least here I don't have to bow to outdated rituals or pretend my family understands me. It's freeing to live somewhere people treat me as special, not just a spare part in a system." Anderson didn't flinch. He dealt with heads of state, generals, and scandal-ridden stars. Ego didn't rattle him. "But isn't there comfort in tradition?" he asked. "A kind of stability?" Harry's smirk was instant. "Comfort for whom? The ones on the golden thrones? Tradition is a cage with better wallpaper. My family clings to it because it hides the cracks." The atmosphere shifted. A thin layer of ice began forming between the two men. Anderson pressed, still calm. "And yet millions admire the monarchy. They see it as a symbol of unity. What do you say to them?" Harry's response was sharp, almost venomous. "They're in love with a fairy tale. They don't see the machinery behind it. The manipulation, the silencing, the control. They celebrate the crown, but ignore who bleeds for it." Anderson paused. He could feel the escalation. But his instinct as a journalist told him to keep going, to let the truth reveal itself, however raw. "Let's talk about family," he said gently. "You've spoken about Meghan and your children with a lot of emotion. How is life as a husband and father, away from the institution?" Harry's jaw tightened, his smile turning brittle. "Life as a husband and father is exactly as it should be. Mine. The press has no right to dissect it, nor does the monarchy. I protect what's mine. That's more than they ever did for me." Anderson gave a measured nod. "But when you speak publicly, in interviews, documentaries, even your book, you invite questions. Is there a contradiction between demanding privacy while sharing intimate details on your own terms?" Harry's patience cracked. "That's a tired argument. Privacy isn't silence. It's control. I decide what the world gets to know. If people can't grasp that, they're not worth addressing." The temperature in the room dropped. What had begun as conversation now felt like combat. Anderson smiled thinly, refusing to retreat. "That's one way to put it. Some might say that sounds selective." Harry leaned back, arms crossed, defiant, unyielding. "Selective? No, it's called freedom. Something you, as an American, should understand better than most." The words landed like a gauntlet thrown. The warmth from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a biting chill. Even the faint creak of a camera tripod felt amplified. Anderson gave a slow, deliberate nod and scribbled a note, his expression unreadable. But inside, he knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a powder keg, and Prince Harry had just lit the match. The room went still. Cameras rolled in silence. Crew members held their breath. At the center sat 2 men, one grounded in journalistic calm, the other burning with defiance, as the tension rippled like heat rising from asphalt. Anderson Cooper leaned in slightly, his tone still calm but edged with quiet precision, the kind that cuts through armor without ever raising its voice. "You've spoken a great deal about your struggles with the institution," he began evenly. "But I want to ask about something deeper. Your mother, Princess Diana, wasn't just a royal figure. She was a global symbol, not because of her title, but because of how she connected with people. Do you feel you carry her legacy?" For a fleeting moment, Harry's composure faltered. His jaw tightened, lips pressing into a thin line. When he finally spoke, the words came quick, clipped, defensive. "Legacy is a word the media loves," he said sharply. "You built my mother up, you tore her down, and now you expect me to wear her story like a crown? I'm not my mother's replacement, and I won't let anyone use her name to measure me." Anderson gave a slow, steady nod. "Fair point," he said softly. "But many still see you as continuing her spirit, her independence, her willingness to challenge tradition. Isn't that something you embrace?" Harry let out a small scoff, leaning back, arms folded across his chest. "You all want to turn me into a symbol because it makes for better headlines. I'm not a candle in the wind for anyone's nostalgia. My mother's memory belongs to me, to my family, not to the public, and certainly not to journalists looking for a storyline." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Anderson absorbed them without reaction, years of discipline anchoring him. He simply adjusted his notepad and pivoted. "All right," he said, tone light but eyes steady. "Let's talk about Meghan. You've spoken about the difficulties you've both faced. Some critics argue that your marriage pulled you further from your family. How do you respond to that?" Harry's eyes flared. "Critics?" he repeated with quiet contempt. "You mean the people who've never met her? Who sit behind desks, pretending they understand marriage? Meghan saved me from a suffocating institution. She didn't pull me away, she freed me. Anyone who can't see that is blind." Anderson didn't rise to the bait. "But when you say she saved you," he countered gently, "doesn't that suggest that without her, you'd still be trapped? Doesn't that give her a kind of singular power over your choices?" Harry shook his head slowly, smirking. "Singular power? No, it's called partnership. Something most journalists can't comprehend. Too busy dissecting other people's lives to live their own." The sting landed cleanly, but Anderson stayed composed, scribbling a note before shifting again. "You've also talked about raising your children in America," he said. "How is fatherhood different here than it might have been in the UK?" Harry exhaled sharply, irritation flickering across his face. "It's simple. My children get to be normal. They're not props for photographers or pawns in some royal chess game. And unlike back home, they have a father who protects them." Anderson tilted his head. "So you don't believe your family would have protected them?" Harry's laugh was cold. "Protected them? The monarchy doesn't even protect its own heirs, let alone the so-called spares children. My kids would have been sacrifices on the altar of tradition. That's not family. That's exploitation." A long pause. Anderson sighed quietly, his patience tested but intact. "Some might argue," he said carefully, "that by participating in documentaries, books, and interviews like this one, you're also putting them in the spotlight, only on your own terms. How do you reconcile that?" Harry leaned forward now, his voice hardening. "I don't need to reconcile anything. I decide what's best for my family. The media doesn't. The Crown doesn't. And certainly not people like you." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The silence that followed was brittle. Anderson's jaw flexed, a flicker of irritation barely visible beneath the calm exterior. "It seems," he said slowly, "that every question about accountability comes back to control. Do you think there's room for balance?" Harry's smirk returned, wider this time. "Balance is a myth. You either control your story or it controls you. I refuse to be a victim of narrative anymore. That's something you'll never understand, because your career depends on poking at other people's lives. For the first time, Anderson's composure cracked. Just slightly, a crease formed between his brows, and the air between them turned electric. He let the silence stretch, long enough for the cameras to capture the tension, the pride, the barely restrained anger simmering beneath both men. Then, quietly, deliberately, he asked, "All right then, let's look ahead. What do you see for yourself in the future? What does life look like for Prince Harry 10 years from now?" Harry chuckled under his breath, not warmly, but with that low, dismissive sound of a man who feels above the question. "The future?" he repeated. "The future is mine, not something I owe to public consumption. I'll do what I want, when I want, and people can either accept that or choke on their expectations." Anderson tapped his pen once, then again. Slowly, the calm mask was still there, but his eyes had hardened. He shifted in his chair, leaning back with the deliberate patience of a man deciding whether to end the fight or let it burn. The tension in the room was no longer subtext. It was alive, breathing between them, visible even in the stillness of the lights. Anderson's pen froze midair. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. When he finally spoke, "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. Then, looking back up, his gaze sharpened. "You know, Harry, I've interviewed people at their highest and lowest points. Presidents under scandal, soldiers returning from war, families fractured by tragedy. And they all shared one thing." A pause. The words hung deliberately before he added, "Humility. Do you think there's a risk that yours has been lost along the way?" Harry stiffened. The smug confidence drained, replaced by a flash of anger that rippled through his features. "Humility," he repeated, his voice low but sharp. "Don't lecture me about humility, Anderson. I've lived through things you couldn't survive. If I sound unapologetic, it's because I've earned the right to be. Humility is for those still begging for approval. I don't need anyone's." The words hit like a slap, the arrogance in them echoing louder than anything said before. The air thickened. The silence was heavy, pressing down on everyone in the room. Anderson's response came slow, deliberate. His tone was still composed, but there was a metallic edge now, faint but unmistakable. That's one way of seeing it. The cameras kept rolling, their quiet hum merging with the growing unease that gripped the set. Every crew member felt it. The sense that the interview was teetering on the edge of implosion. Anderson adjusted in his chair, his pen resting motionless on his notepad. His patience was intact, but the calm had begun to feel like restraint. "Harry," he said, measured, careful. "You've spoken about control, about carving your own path. But critics point out that many of your public appearances, your book, the Netflix series, interviews like this one, still revolve around the monarchy. How do you respond to people who say you're trying to escape an institution you can't stop talking about?" Harry gave a short, sharp laugh, the kind that wasn't humor, but defiance. "Critics, always critics," he said, his tone dripping with contempt. "They cling to their illusions because they need the crown to mean something. Let me be clear. I talk about it because it shaped me, because it scarred me. The monarchy isn't something you walk away from. It's stamped into your skin. And if I expose its flaws, that's my right. If people can't handle the truth, that's their problem." Anderson raised an eyebrow, the calm exterior unmoved. "But you've also profited from those flaws. Do you see the contradiction there?" Harry leaned forward, eyes narrowing to slits. "Profited?" he shot back. "Tell me, Anderson, is it profit when you claw back the pieces of your life that were stolen from you? Or is it survival? I took back my story, and if people want to pay to hear it, so be it. Better they hear it from me than from the tabloids you people love to quote." The contempt in his tone sliced through the air. Even Anderson's legendary patience began to fray. His voice, when it came, was still level, but it carried a weight now. "I don't quote tabloids, Harry. I ask the questions the public once answered. There's a difference. Harry smirked. Slow, taunting. Semantics. At the end of the day, you're still digging. Still feeding the public appetite for drama. You're no different than the rest of them. That line landed hard. The insult didn't bounce. It stuck. For the first time, Anderson didn't hide behind a smile. His eyes flickered with something sharper. A flash of the man beneath the practiced composure. You've been critical of the press, he said quietly. And yet here you are again, sitting in front of cameras. Is it fair to say you want the attention? Just on your own terms. Harry's lips curled into a half smile, mocking and cruel. The old trap question. Attention, fame, celebrity. You people never tire of that narrative, do you? I'm not here because I want your attention. I'm here because you begged for mine. Let's not pretend otherwise. The arrogance in his voice cut through the air like glass. A producer in the back shifted uneasily. The set, once calm and measured, now felt electric, charged with something volatile and unspoken. Even the faint hum of the studio light seemed louder. Anderson sat still, eyes locked on Harry. His face was calm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed the battle beneath the surface. All right, he said finally, his voice low, almost weary. Let's shift gears again. He leaned forward, his tone quieter now, but more pointed, deliberate. You've often spoken about how much your mother meant to you. She fought for her independence, for her voice. Sometimes against the same institution you criticize. Do you think she would be proud of how you've handled things? The question landed like a detonator. Harry froze. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, anger, maybe both. His voice, when it came, was tight, trembling beneath the surface. Don't you dare, he said, each word controlled but dangerous. Don't you dare sit there and use my mother as a prop in your little broadcast. You never knew her. You never knew what she endured. The room went still. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, the silence vibrating with the sound of something breaking. Composure, civility, trust. Anderson didn't move. His eyes were locked on Harry's, calm but unflinching. Anderson's voice dropped, low and measured, the kind of tone that signaled the gloves were finally off. Harry, he said, his eyes unblinking. No one's denying that your life's been difficult, but pain doesn't excuse arrogance. It doesn't justify turning every question into an attack. You say you want to be understood, but all I see right now is a man who refuses to be known. Harry's jaw flexed. Maybe that's because the people trying to know me are the same ones who've made a living twisting everything I say. You think you're different, Anderson. You're just more polite about it. Anderson's gaze didn't waver. Politeness isn't the same as restraint. And right now I'm showing you both. The audience behind the cameras held their breath. The rhythm of the exchange had changed. Slower, quieter, but sharper, as if every word now risked drawing blood. Harry leaned back, his smirk returning. You think you can psychoanalyze me on air? Go ahead, that's what you all do. Dissect the man until there's nothing left but headlines. Anderson shook his head slowly. No. I'm trying to remind you that there's a difference between telling your story and building your own mythology. One is honest, the other is theater. Harry's eyes flickered, the first real sign of emotion breaking through the mask. You think this is theater? He said, his voice low, trembling with anger. You think surviving the most powerful institution in Britain is a performance? Anderson's tone remained steady. No, but I think what you're doing right now is... A murmur ran through the control room. Harry's face darkened. You're lucky we're on camera, he said coldly. Anderson didn't flinch. No, Harry, you're lucky we are. Because without the cameras, without the audience, this facade might not hold. The silence that followed was heavy. Not the silence of hesitation, but of reckoning. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. A boom mic operator swallowed hard, afraid even the sound of his breath might break the spell. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Anderson stared across the gulf between them, his face calm but his eyes unyielding. Harry's hand clenched around the armrest of his chair, the tension radiating through every movement. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. But there was venom in it. You people love to tear men down. You build them up so you can watch them burn. Maybe that's what this is really about, isn't it? You want your fall from grace moment. Anderson's reply came like a blade through fog. Controlled, deliberate. No, Harry. What I want is truth. But you keep mistaking truth for attack. Maybe because somewhere deep down, you know the difference. The words landed like a gavel strike. Harry looked away, jaw tight, eyes flickering with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. Something closer to fear. The cameras kept rolling. The audience would never know the full weight of that silence, but everyone in the room did. Because at that moment, it wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a mirror, and neither man liked what he saw staring back. And yet, you expect me to bow my head and answer politely? Harry snapped, his voice rising now, sharp and defiant. No, that's over. I'm done playing by anyone's rules but my own. The air grew heavier, almost electric. Every eye in the room was fixed on the two men. Anderson's patience, stretched thinner than it had ever been, finally broke. He set his pen down slowly, deliberately, and looked straight into Harry's eyes. Let me tell you something, Anderson said, his voice low but cutting through the silence like glass. I've interviewed presidents under fire, soldiers who've lost limbs, mothers who've lost children, survivors who had every reason to give up but didn't. You know what they all had in common? He leaned forward. Humility, gratitude, perspective. What I see here isn't courage, Harry. It's arrogance. You call it honesty. I call it entitlement. Harry blinked, stunned for half a heartbeat before his expression hardened again. Entitlement? From you? He scoffed. You don't get to define me. You don't get to lecture me about humility. I've lived a life you couldn't survive a day in. Anderson shook his head slowly, the disappointment almost palpable. No, Harry. You've been given a life most people couldn't imagine. And instead of owning that, instead of using it with grace, you sit here sneering at every question, treating every opportunity as an insult. His voice dropped lower. That's not survival. That's self-destruction. The words landed like a blow. Harry's jaw locked tight, his face flushing red. You think you can shame me? You think I owe you anything? I don't owe anyone explanations. Least of all you. Anderson didn't flinch. Then why are you here? Why sit in this chair, under these lights, if not to explain yourself? You rail against the media, yet you run to the spotlight. You talk about freedom, yet you're shackled to your bitterness. You want to be heard, Harry, but you don't want to listen. And that, Anderson's tone sharpened, is why you're here alone, without the institution, without the family, without the respect you think you deserve. Harry's fists clenched on the armrests, his voice rising, brittle and raw. You think you know me? You don't. You're just another vulture pretending to care. My family didn't deserve me. The monarchy didn't deserve me. And maybe the world doesn't either. But I'll still live my truth whether you like it or not. Anderson leaned back now, his expression shifting. No longer calm, but cold. The kind of cold that comes from restraint, not anger. You want the truth? Here it is. You're not living your truth, Harry. You're hiding behind it. You're not the brave rebel you pretend to be. You're a man who had everything, and decided to burn it down, not out of conviction, but out of pride. He paused, his gaze steady, and if Diana were here, I think she'd weep at what you've become. The air seemed to crack. The sound of those words hung in the studio like a slap. Harry froze. For the first time, the arrogance flickered, replaced by something raw, unguarded. Then the fury returned. He shoved back his chair, the scrape echoing through the studio. That's it, he spat. I won't sit here and be insulted. This interview is over. Gasps rippled through the crew. A producer half rose, hand outstretched. But Harry was already tearing off his mic, the wire snapping as he ripped it from his collar. He stormed toward the exit, the door slamming behind him. Anderson didn't move. He simply watched him go, then turned back to the camera, his voice calm, his composure restored, but the gravity unmistakable. "Sometimes the hardest truth to hear," he said softly, "is the one that cuts closest to the bone. Tonight you've seen a man unwilling to face his reflection. That's his choice. But our job is to ask and to listen, even when the answers come wrapped in arrogance." He exhaled slowly, the tension in the room still humming as he looked directly into the lens. "I want to apologize to you, our viewers," he said evenly. "We hoped for honesty and reflection. What we got was something else entirely. But perhaps, in its own way, it revealed more than any answer could." The cameras lingered on Anderson's composed face for a final moment, before fading to black. And in living rooms across America, audiences sat in stunned silence. The prince who had come to tell his story had walked away instead, leaving behind not clarity, but controversy. Was this the most explosive interview of Prince Harry's career? Or just another clash between the royal and the press? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you don't miss more unbelievable moments like this.